Welcome to Change the Narrative. I'm your host, JD Fuller.
I'm Susie Younger,
an African-American licensed psychotherapist.
I'm also a licensed therapist.
We talk about the isms. We talk about the phobias, anything that marginalizes and oppresses.
As a white woman, I ask the questions white people are too afraid to ask.
Everything we are not and everything we are is because of fear. Through a mental health lens, Susie and I will have difficult conversations with celebrity guests, political activists, and everyone in between. Our mind will tell us whatever we want to believe, but the truth lives in the body, and that's where change occurs. Are you ready to change the narrative?
Okay, hello everyone. I am so excited to introduce Henry Malden, who is a fabulous producer and talent manager. His company, Hendar Media, develops and produces scripted and non-scripted film, television, and digital content. We are so excited to have him today for his new film, which made both of us cry, called The Lucky One. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Super excited to have you here, Henry.
Did you just win another award?
We just won an award for a festival that we were in Australia. We won the Stop Stigma Award at the Cambria Film Festival.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Super excited.
We're trying to do our part.
I truly believe you've done your part with this film. I mean, you know, we watched it, we couldn't stop talking about it, watched it again. And I'm big on how experiences feel in the body, because that's where the truth lives. And I was so emotionally moved watching this film. You know, the fact that it focuses on this Black couple who have schizophrenia, I think is just, it's groundbreaking. It really is. Before we get started, though, I want to make sure that I let people know what schizophrenia is. Schizophrenia is a disorder that affects a person's ability to think, feel, and behave clearly. The exact cause of schizophrenia is not known, but a combination of genetics, environment, and altered brain chemistry and structure may play a role. Schizophrenia is characterized by thoughts or experiences that seem out of touch with reality, disorganized speech or behavior, and decreased participation in daily activities. Difficulty with concentration and memory are also present. So, being a Black therapist, I'm aware of the invisibility of Black people and people of color with regard to mental illness and the stigma around it. So I just, again, celebrate you being a part of what's trying to decrease stigma around mental illness. You know, it felt extremely important, and it felt like it humanized mental illness. It gave it a personality. And that's what's so missing in people's understanding of the disorder and mental illness in general. Was that the intention of the film?
Well, yes. Our intention of the film was to make this married couple who function, you know, they're highly functioning people, but with these very strong mental health issues, you know, to make them seem like normal people. You know, one of the things that we were trying to do is when people see people, or when they think of someone with mental health issues, they retreat usually. Right. And our story was all about telling their love story. They just happen to have schizophrenia. But Absolutely. What we were trying to portray was the love that they have for each other.
Yeah, that was so evident. It really was. How do you think economics plays into mental illness in the Black community?
Oh, well, economics is one of the major issues right now, because what we see is there are lots of people out there with mental illness, but if they could have treatments, or if they can have treatments and support, then it can make it that much easier for them and for everyone else. But the lower your socioeconomic class, the harder it is to get treatment, and the harder it is for people to understand what's going on.
Which fosters the stigma and why
Correct.
people are so afraid.
As you well know, JD, one of probably our largest mental health facilities are jails.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's a problem. And
It's a
it's
huge
been a
problem.
problem for decades now.
Yeah.
But mental illness is still, it's still growing within the population. However, there still isn't an answer for health officials to grapple with how to handle these people.
Well, and I would add to that and say that there was research done a while ago, probably about 20 years ago, that said that the average age of the person in prison is, the average intellectual level is that of a person who completed the second grade. I mean, so if you think about the limitations that depicts, that's hugely impactful and very scary and sad. I mean, basically systems are failing people beginning in elementary school, and that, the prison pipeline is real. The fact that, so many brown and black kids are identified as emotionally disturbed is just, a gateway to where this ends up, which is either, on the street or in prison, and then
Right.
add the fact that there's a lack of safe places for people to manage their mental illness. What you're saying is definitely true.
Right. And the systemic problems that we have too, it just all plays into it, because we hear these stories every single day about people who are having an episode and the episode is not handled properly. So it goes awry, and for a person of color, mainly a black person, it usually ends up in a usually a very negative space.
Yeah, look, I mean, the police aren't equipped, and yet they're the first ones called when there's a mental illness or a mental health crisis in the community that they aren't from and that they're not connected to. It's a problem. There's no effective management. We can thank Reagan for pretty much shutting all of that down back in the 80s.
Yeah.
One of the things you said to start off with that I wanted to go back to is, I just want to emphasize for people who are listening that this did not feel like a documentary. It felt personal and intimate, and it was like a love story being told by family. How did you manage to create that effect? Because
it's interesting that you bring it up, because the director, Debra Wilson, is cousins with Alexander, who
There we
is
go.
the male. So
okay.
we started that way. One of the other things that we thought was very important was to not use subtitles.
Yeah.
Because these guys, you have to engage with the subjects in order to feel, have some sort of empathy for what they are going through.
Yeah.
And by using subtitles, we felt that would make it more clinical.
Yes.
And so it was a choice not to use subtitles. And I will tell you, we went back and forth with it, because there are moments where you're just wondering, I have no idea what Alexander's talking about. But
it's funny you say that, because I never wondered, because it could be because of my clinical lens. So I'll say that first off, but it just drew you in so much emotionally. It didn't matter what he was saying. It was the experience that he was having that I felt I was, privileged to be a part of. That's what was so amazing about it. You know what I mean?
That's
and the
awesome.
thing, and the other thing that was really, really profound was the way you had them tell their story. That was just so genius, and the camera angles. I mean, just every part of it was just really amazing. It was also moving when she said that he takes care of her, that Alexander takes care of her, but it felt like, she took care of him. Is that an accurate perception?
I would say that's fairly accurate. She seems to be more functional than Alexander, Timothy has actually written a book.
Oh,
So she's highly functional. Her father was Ishmael Reed, who's the world-renowned poet. So
oh my
she's got a
goodness.
lot of she's got good genes when it comes to writing. But we think it feels like she takes care of Alexander, but they're part of a generation where I would say they're baby boomers, where it was always the man taking care of the woman.
Yeah.
So I feel like without trying to emasculate him, she uses that term.
Ah, wow. That's profound.
But we see that she takes care of him.
Wow. It's just the more information you give, the more
Yeah.
blown away I am by it. Susie, you have some questions. Go
Well,
ahead.
I'm just, as you're saying that, I'm thinking that when JD and I watched it, she called me back and she said, "Why is it so short?" Because both of us, I think we both watched it twice, and it really feels like you've just captured the spirit and the essence of who they are by just having the camera there. And I love that was a choice not to have the subtitles, because it was so honest.
Right. Well, the backstory on why it was so short is we were going to make a feature-length doc about mental health within the Black community, and it was sort of a big overarching piece that we really wanted to tackle from a lot of different angles. However, as you all know, being independent feature makers and filmmakers, we could not get any funding from anyone.
Wait a minute, you're telling me that Hollywood would not fund a Black schizophrenic couple?
Would not.
Are you telling me that?
Would not. So what we did was we got a couple of grants. We got an Oakland Arts grant and we got another grant. And so we just began to shoot. So we were shooting, and we were going to build our story around Alexander and Timothy, but expand broadly. After about 6 or 7 months, we just didn't get any money. So we had this footage, and then we moved on to another project, which JD's familiar with, which is about butch Black lesbians. Yeah. And so as we were working on that project, trying to get funding, we decided, let's just take what we have. We can tell a short story with the footage that we've already shot using our own money and our small grants.
Wow.
And just tell a love story. And it worked out for us.
That's amazing.
Yes, it did.
But it's so disappointing.
But I will tell you, we really tried to get money and we got rejected so many times. It was like, okay, I guess we're just going to have to tell this one story. And so we built the story around, the story was built around the lice infestation, which was like a sort of, which was sort of like the subject that the story's built on. And we felt like we really put that story together. So we just built from there, and we were able to find some really good shooters. Our shooters, Alex DePaul and Mike Seeley and Jim Choi, they really made it sing. They made it look really good. So we're really proud of those guys.
It really did sing. And I was a former talent agent. That's how we know each other. Mm-hmm. So the talent agent and the therapist in me really thought, wow, that's a double whammy. I don't know how when you were thinking about it, how you thought it would get funded, because I can only imagine what it would look like in a pitch in a room full of white people.
Right. And we knew it would be difficult, but we decided not only would we pitch to Hollywood, we pitched to organizations. We pitched to hospitals. And one of the biggest pitches that we were going to make was to Kaiser. And unfortunately, the person who was the head of Kaiser died like right before we could get our pitch into him. But we feel good about what we did, and we also feel like now that we have this story out there, we can sort of expand and still tell that bigger story we want
I
to
was
tell.
hoping you would say that, Henry.
But,
I was so hoping you would say that.
Great, because it's deep, as you well know. It's really deep. And you mentioned Reagan. It goes back, and I moved to California in 1980.
Oh my God.
So that was the time when things started. You started seeing people with mental health issues on the street, as opposed to in where they were putting them in asylums or homes, institutions. But those were gone, and so you would see them on the streets. And moving to San Francisco, that's really how the homeless population began in San Francisco.
Yes.
From that one moment that Reagan had done.
Absolutely.
Wow, interesting. You know, Henry, people think that if you have mental illness, then you're crazy. And JD and I were talking about this. We loved it when Timothy said, well, what do people with schizophrenia look like anyway?
Right.
Was it schizophrenia? Was it mental illness? What was it? Was it that they were African American, the couple, the community, the relationship? What was it that drew you to tell this story?
Well, I think for Debra, you know, she really wanted, since she'd had this person in her family, she really wanted to tell the story about mental illness from a personal view.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I've always been fascinated by all of mental health, because it is so you know, it's vast. However, there are so many different aspects to it that if you're not familiar with it, then it is easily dismissed as crazy. And you know, using that word crazy, you know,
Horrible.
It just dismisses everything immediately. So if you are a person who suffers from mental illness, you don't know what's your next reaction to someone who dismisses you like that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was drawn to that aspect of it, and the big overarching picture of differences between people who have anxiety and people who are on the spectrum, and trying to add them all together. But there was no way that we could do that story and still tell this love story. So this is, at the end of the day, for us, the love story prevails over all.
Absolutely.
And it really does. I mean, it's such a love story. There was the incident in the apartment where they have that special moment and he starts to dance and they're in the middle of the night dancing. It was so endearing and moving and intimate. Talk to us about him and his level of engagement and hers with the cameras, because clearly she loved the camera.
She loved the camera. Well, you know, we spent a lot of time with them. So by the time we in pre-production, we spent a lot of time. So by the time we actually started to shoot, they were totally comfortable with us. And we were just an extension of their lives. Okay. So during that night, you know, one of our photographers spent the night with them. And when he spent that night, all of this magic began to happen, you know, like when she's sleeping in the bathtub and when he
Wow.
is on the floor and they can't sleep together, and
Yes.
just waking up in the middle of the night and just her trying to calm him,
Mhm.
and all of those things, they were comfortable with us, and that took a minute, but
Makes
by
sense.
that, and by Deborah being family, that also helped them be comfortable as well,
Okay.
because they knew we weren't going to try to exploit them.
Right.
Right.
It was
Or
a
I
safety.
hope they felt that.
There
Yeah,
was a safety
exactly.
there. You could feel the safety.
Yes.
You could absolutely feel it. Felt like what the cameras were doing was just celebrating them. They were,
Correct.
it was just a celebration of their love story. And so often when you see people on the street, or I know for me, when I did my hours at the LGBT center and people would walk in addiction or having episodes, the story, how they got there, is invisibilized, and people just make judgments based on the label. And
Right.
so you
Correct.
didn't start there. You didn't start with, here's the
Right.
definition of schizophrenia. You just told the story.
Right. Now, don't get me wrong. There were incidents that occurred as we were shooting with outsiders,
Of course.
but like people,
Yeah, like tell us.
like for instance, there was some dude is walking by and he sees Alexander and calls him crazy.
Oh,
And Timothy reacts immediately, and she just jumps in the guy's face. She's like, do not, don't categorize him. You don't know us. And it became a little contentious.
wow.
But those incidents do happen. But one of the other things that we wanted to show was where they're from, which is Oakland. And around Oakland, everyone knows who they are. So
Oh,
when
that's
we
great.
were out shooting, people were like, "Oh, there's Alexander and Timothy. Oh yeah, we know them." We actually we did an interview over at UC Berkeley at their mental health facility,
Wow.
and they were so happy. It's like, "Oh yeah, we're familiar with them. We love them," and so the community knows them. So when you see them, you know who's coming. But there are people who are still out there trying to be dismissive with them. So
Of course.
Well, the world is going to know them very well.
oh great.
Okay,
I hope so.
They will. Okay, now I have to ask you the obvious question. Let's talk about the fact that you are a Black creator.
Okay.
Okay. What
There are
are
a couple of us.
Yeah, there
Thank
are,
God.
right?
Thank God. I'm
Thank
grateful for
God.
it.
What are some of the barriers that you do come across, and how do you navigate them?
Well, for me, since I've been,
You've been doing it for a long
as
time.
you well know, yeah, my background is broadcast and journalism. But what I do is I'm an adult now. So the way that I look at things is, if you're not interested, I don't have time to try to figure out why you aren't interested. I have to keep it moving, because there's a lot out there, and I have a lot to give. So I know I just have to wait for the timing for the person to come along who gets what we're doing. Like that's talking to you guys makes it worth it. So as a creator, I know that a lot of people, back to being dismissive, we're kind of going through this I don't want to say renaissance, but there's a movement going on where we are being more inclusive or included. However, there's still a lot of resistance. And, as time goes on, I feel like it's going to tamp down more. However, for me personally, I still have to keep moving forward, because, like I said, I've been around, and I know that it does take a while, but when it happens, it will happen. And it usually happens organically,
Mm-hmm. Are you speaking specifically post George Floyd when you say there's
Yes.
a renaissance?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a movement happening that we all see, but as I said, being an older person, I know how those things can peter out. You know,
Yes,
I
exactly.
work a lot with different brands, and I know the brands are hot right now on the situation, but as soon as the next thing comes along, they
Exactly.
try to jump on that bandwagon. We see the and don't get me wrong, I love that they're all part of the LGBTQ community, but it's taken a while for them to get involved with it, and and we'll see how long they stay involved with it.
Ooh, JD has something to say about
Don't
that.
get me started, Henry. This is only a 40-minute show. We'll have to have you back on to talk about the things related to that, because
Right.
I take issue with it for sure.
I mean, and we see it happening all the time. You know, it's like what's the new,
Yeah,
and but you can't
Right.
really focus on the new all the time because
exactly. I mean, look, the thing is that I'm just so thrilled that you and Deborah ventured out into this arena, and I'm excited to see what you have happening next and how much more you can draw. And I'm hoping that when people see this film, they want to get on board. They want you to do more. And I would love to be a part of it in any way possible, because the stigma is real. We have work to do in the community, just even in terms of the relationship issues between Black men, Black women in the community, in the time when our lives are not valued the way we want them to be valued. I think it's just an opportunity to really start to pull us together and to get us to join with each other and have conversations that are difficult. And this is a way to have one conversation that's difficult. You guys did an amazing job.
oh, great.
Sincerely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we are very proud. I'm proud of our team because I think, I think we actually told the story we wanted to tell.
Yeah,
And,
clearly.
and hopefully we can keep moving forward with it.
How
I
long
hope
did it
so.
take to shoot that?
We shot, we shot for about 4 years. Actually.
Wow.
Yeah, it was about 4
Unbelievable.
years. Yeah. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So we got 28 minutes. It took us 4 years to shoot 28 minutes.
That is unreal. So what I want to know what's happening with you next, what's happening with Deborah next. I mean, what can we look forward to?
So right now we are working on the project which I told you about, which you know about, which is a
Yeah.
sequel to a film that Deborah made probably about 11 years ago called The Butch Mystique, which
Yes.
centers on a group of women who are butch lesbians out there in the Bay Area. And the sequel is what they've been doing like 13 years later and talking about that life. We're also trying to put together a documentary. Actually, we're trying to put together a feature about a book. We got the rights to a book called Paper Sons, which is about a young Asian guy who moves from China to the projects of San Francisco and is raised on hip hop, and the dynamics of his family. The father and the father sending money to the family in the Bay Area while he works in China, and all those dynamics.
Oh, that's
And
going to be interesting.
we're also trying to do a piece on there's a woman, Hazel Scott, who was an entertainer in the 40s and 50s, who was caught up in the Joe McCarthy Un-American
Okay.
issues.
Mhm.
So we're trying to put those stories together. We got so many things out there. Some are docs and
Great.
some are non-docs. So a lot.
Oh my
That's
God,
great.
I want to come work with you.
Come on
I
up. We can use all the help we can get.
Yeah, please count me in. I'd volunteer in a minute. This is so interesting. I have another question for you before we wrap up. First of all, it's been amazing to talk with you. Just so proud and happy for you both.
Oh,
It's
great.
just, it's just
Thank you very
awesome.
much.
And I guess the final question I have is, how did you want people to feel after they watched this film? What did you want to happen?
Well, what I want people, the way I want people to feel after they watch it is I want empathy first and foremost. I want them to be able to see how some people with mental illness function in the world. That's my biggest takeaway right now. I also want people to know that there's nothing to be afraid of. They are the least likely people to do any harm to you, yet you are the most afraid of them. So those are takeaways that I really want people to have.
Those are
but
great.
Empathy, it's all about empathy for us.
All about empathy.
And what kind of response are you getting?
Well, right now we're just submitting the festivals, and we've gotten into a couple festivals, but we really want to crack that code to get into some bigger festivals.
Yeah.
And then we want to try to get it on some sort of broadcast so a bigger audience can see it.
That's great. That's great. Well, again, Henry, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it. Super excited for you. And we'll be looking forward to hear much more about it. And anytime you guys want to come back or you want to come back and talk about projects, please know you have an open invitation. Love talking.
Oh, thank you. And thank you very much.
Henry, for people who want to see the film, where can they find it?
Right now, it is not available until after the festival runs. So we'll get it out to people, and there'll be a place for people to see it after the festival runs. So
yeah, and if there's anything we can do to help to get exposure, or you know what I mean, aside from this, like sharing the link once it's available, please let us know.
Great, will do. And this has been wonderful. I love you both, as you well know.
Yeah, so much. Love you.
Well, we love you
on your podcast.
Thank you. And we are so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry.
Okay,
right,
thank you.
Okay.
All right, see you later.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.